Welcome to the Faculty Expectations Academic Skills Series workshop. So I'm Mark Liffiton. I'm a professor in computer science at Illinois Wesleyan. I've been here about 10, 11 years now. So I've definitely seen a lot of students and know a lot about faculty and our expectations. So the subtitle for this talk is Things You Really Should Know, but Might Not Yet, because nobody told you. And I think this happens a lot. There are a lot of expectations in college that nobody necessarily tells the students. And so you learn a lot of them just along the way, but the sooner you learn them, the better. And so the whole point of this workshop, the whole point of this is to tell you what those expectations are, fill you in on some of them, give you some suggestions for how to approach some of those expectations so that you can be more successful, right? This really is all about understanding the system you are in so you can be more successful in that system. So I want to start with a brief vignette. This is based on many true stories. So this is just a story of a student. We're going to talk about a student named Lee. Lee is enrolled in Stuff and Things 101. So ST 101. It's a very good class. You should take it. Now in this class, Lee is just all about it. College is a new thing for Lee here. Lee goes to the first day of class and receives a syllabus. And Lee dutifully and responsibly puts that syllabus in a folder for that class and has filed it away. That syllabus is all set. No need to read it. In class then, well, as the semester is progressing, the professor isn't directly requiring Lee to do anything really. So Lee is going to make good use of that time. Lee is going to do some shopping. You know, there's some things you got to get done. Other times there might be some unplanned catching up on sleep. These things, they happen. Lee is just going to use the time productively in class. As the semester progresses, online quizzes keep just sort of happening. Lee misses a lot of them. They're pretty sure it's hurting their grade, but they don't know for sure. They're frustrated that they don't really know when the quizzes will be or what impact it might have on their grade. Meanwhile, in that syllabus they filed away, all sorts of details are calling out for attention. So yeah. At some point, Lee's friend Shell mentions that they went to office hours. Lee says something like, well, that's very nice, that's good for you. But internally, mentally, they're thinking, oh, they're feeling bad for their friend, right? They must really be doing poorly in that class, going to office hours. Lee falls into a good schedule for getting work done outside of class. The night before each class, they look on Moodle, see if anything is due the next day. Nice and responsible. They get really annoyed though when something that takes more than 30 minutes is due the next day. They have to stay up all night for those sometimes. It's really just no fun. Continuing on, Lee's friend Shell comes back and mentions tutors and a resource center that is available for the Stuff and Things classes. And Lee feels just even worse for Shell now, just given how badly they must be doing. It's really sad. Around the mid-semester grade time, Lee gets a mid-semester grade report, and it's a D. The midterm exam, though, was asking about lots of stuff Lee just didn't know very well, but it's an easy fix. Lee starts taking notes. Anything that goes on the board gets copied into Lee's notes. When the professor is not writing, Lee knows they can go back to shopping or napping. All set. Near the end of the semester, maybe 3 weeks out, Lee checks Moodle, looks at the grade book, still has a D. So Lee writes to the professor, hey, is there extra credit? I need a B or better. Lee does not appreciate not hearing back for 2 days until Monday, nor do they appreciate the short response the professor sends that says something or other about the syllabus. And at the end of the semester, Lee has a D, and Shell has an A, by the way. Now, this is maybe feels exaggerated, right? Maybe it's like, these things, all right, so it's silly, haha, but all of these things are things that have happened and continue to happen and happen actually quite a bit with really no exaggeration. And so hopefully you can look at these things and say, right, well, I'm not going to make those mistakes. But also maybe you're looking at some of these things and saying, yeah, I do some of those things. I have some of those habits. And so what I want to do is address some of these, talk about some of the expectations we have as faculty for students, and again, how you can approach them and how you can engage with your classes in certain ways to meet the expectations and succeed in those classes. So let's just dive into some things then. So first of all, syllabi. The syllabus is more than just pretty paper, it turns out. The syllabus is actually important, and there are actually useful things in that syllabus. So here are the types of things that might actually be in your syllabus that you might not recognize if you don't actually read it. So grading policies. Where does the grade come from? So often students just don't even realize that. They might think a certain thing is more important than it is, or a certain thing is less important than it is. And it's all going to be laid out in the syllabus. Likewise, things like resources. What's allowed to be used in this class? What's available? And maybe what's disallowed. It's really no fun to work on an assignment using certain resources you found and then find out after the fact that that wasn't allowed and that was essentially a form of cheating. So knowing what that is good, and it's often spelled out in the syllabus. Of course, deadlines and assignments. Many syllabi have calendars that tell you when everything's going to be. It's not going to sneak up on you. You can know from the very first day of class. And oftentimes professors will put important suggestions in their syllabi, things for just how to do well in that class, things based on previous experiences students have had, what they've learned when they've taught the class in the past, and just useful things to help you succeed. So, okay, what should I do as a student? What can I possibly do? It's really pretty simple, but as faculty, we expect, and you really should, take just 5 minutes, no more than 5 minutes on the first day of class just to read through that syllabus carefully. Now, some of it you might think is just not important. You know, there's a description of the course, you don't quite know what it's talking about, something like that, fine. But the details in there, you are going to find things that matter. And you don't want any of those details to be surprises to you later. So it just takes literally 5 minutes. Read through it. And you might say, but my professor, they went over the syllabus in the class. Why do I need to read it? Couple different reasons. Main one being, if your professor did that, you probably fell asleep. It's not terribly interesting when a professor is reading a syllabus. And they're not going to go over everything. And there's just a lot of value just read it yourself. Again, 5 minutes won't take much time, can really pay off just in that knowledge about how the course is set up that you might not otherwise get. Then we get to the class session itself, right? Alternatives to napping. What might we do during class other than nap? So, all right, being silly there, but a lot of times students feel that they don't get anything out of class, right? I hear this a lot. I know that's a common feeling, and I know where it's coming from. A lot of students really don't think they're getting anything out of class. But that's often coming from a place where you might have sort of the wrong expectation for what class should be in some ways. And there are ways you can engage with that class to get something out of it, even if you're not so far. And so I want to say that it's not expected that everything that goes on in class is going to be perfectly understood by you, and you're going to just learn everything from the class and you're going to be good to go. If you feel that that's the expectation, then you might go to class, realize that's not happening, and decide, well, it's just not working. But that's not quite how it's supposed to be, right? Instead, the expectation most commonly is that you're going to get an overview of the topic covered in that class, whatever it might be, and you're going to get pieces that will fit together later. It's very rare that you're going to learn everything 100% in class itself, and it's very common that things won't fully make sense and that you might feel lost and confused at times. But if you go in with that expectation that, okay, right, I'm going to at least gain, what is the topic? How do these things fit together to some extent? What all do I need to be thinking about? That's a good starting point. You can build on that. You can work with that, right? Along the way, though, it is also expected that you're going to keep some decent records of that class session. Some kind of notes. Now, whatever way works for you. There are lots of different formats. Some people want to type them. Some people want to write them. There's nice formats with columns and everything. But whatever works for you, go for it. But you need that record because later on, you're going to need something that aids and jogs your memory. You're not going to remember everything from class itself, but you're going to need to go back to it to reference it, to pull it all together later. And on top of all this, not an expectation exactly, but if you do this, you're winning, this is great. Ask for clarification and repetition during class, right? So if you feel that class isn't making sense, you're not getting what you want out of it, you can take control of that. You can say, hey, can you please repeat that last point? Or I didn't understand that. Can you give me that in a different way? Or can you help me understand this aspect of it? Just asking for that extra bit of clarification, extra bit of support can make a huge difference. And it's going to benefit you and it's going to benefit everybody else in that class as well. So that's not necessarily an expectation. You don't have to do that. But if you do, I promise it's going to make things a lot better for you and the people around you. And by the way, if you really can't stay awake in class, because I know that happens sometimes, I'd really suggest just talk to professor or just write to them and just apologize, right? You might not realize this, but to us, it's a little insulting if somebody's just sort of falling asleep when I'm trying to do something there. So you can apologize. You can explain if you want to what caused that, but honestly, really figure out what caused that to happen. How did you not get enough sleep? And can you adjust something? Can you work that out? I'm going to talk a bit more in just a second about sleep. It's pretty darn important. Now, outside of class, again, alternatives to napping. So napping outside of class is a good idea, but we also want to do some other things in addition to napping. And what is that? Well, our coursework, we often think, okay, I'll do it later. And this is incredibly common. Procrastination is just a human thing. It's not specific to students. It's not specific to some students, right? Procrastination is a thing. And I think there are entirely other workshops in the academic skills series about procrastination, time management, and so on. So I'll just talk about it a little bit. But one really important non-expectation I want to mention is that it's not expected that everything we assign can be done the night before. A lot of things are going to take more time than that. And if you start something the night before that really needs more time, what's the end result? Well, you can get something done, you can get something turned in, but it's not going to be as good quality as you'd really like it to be. And of course, that'll be reflected in the grade as well. And so it's important to recognize that it is expected, this is literally in the course catalog, but it is expected that on average, a class will take up about 10 to 12 hours of your time per week. That includes the time in class. So if you've spent about 3 hours in class in a week, there are going to be maybe 7 to 9 hours of out-of-class work. On average, sometimes more, sometimes less. But that's about what you should be planning for and thinking that I need to set aside time for a given class. And we really do expect that you are going to plan out your time and start any assignment sufficiently far in advance to get it done well by the deadline. And this basically means looking at any given assignment and figuring out how long it's going to take. Thinking about, okay, how long does it take me to write a paper of this length? How long does it take me to do this kind of research? How long does it take me to do this type of mathematical work or whatever else it is? And making sure you give yourself enough time, both to do the work and to potentially ask questions about it along the way. If you have some piece of it partway through that you realize doesn't make sense, you need some time in addition to the time you're working on it to ask and maybe wait to get a response about that. So starting early is really important. And honestly, the best students are often not the smartest students, but rather just the students who are able to start things in advance and give themselves enough time to do good quality work on whatever their assignment is. And as a super bonus points kind of thing, if you finish early, you have time potentially to ask your professor to look over your work. Not all students even really think about this, but you can bring completed work to your professor and ask them. They won't always be able to do it. Maybe it doesn't make sense for the kind of work or for their class, but you can ask them to look it over and give you feedback on it before you submit it. And I'm often really happy to do this. I won't go through and do a full grading pass and tell you here's everything and here's what your grade would be. But I can skim through something and make sure that there are no egregious mistakes, spot anything that might stand out, give feedback on any little things that just sort of stand out to me. And then the student can take that, do even better, right? Improve their work before they submit it for a grade. Another thing to think about is graded versus ungraded work. And a really common thought among students is, well, if it's not graded, it's not important. That can be low priority. And I get that, right? The points, the grade, that's the main motivation for a lot of things in a lot of classes. But it's not really the case that ungraded means you can just skip it, because even though that's not graded, it's going to be preparation for something later that is graded. And by doing this now, whatever work it is, it's going to make it easier for you to do the work later or help you do the work later better to a higher standard of quality. So really, our expectation is that when we're assigning something, whether it's reading or some sort of class prep or anything else, without points assigned, that is for your benefit to help you with the rest of the class. And I know that can be hard. I know when you've got so many things going on, it can be really tough to prioritize the thing that, well, it doesn't have an immediate consequence. But if you can plan out your time enough, you can have time for these things and you can get them done to help yourself later, to help those grades on the later assigned work. And also, please do sleep. Do sleep. Taking naps is great, but getting just enough sleep every day is so critical. Learning, the main thing you're trying to do here, and that the grades end up attached to, it does not work without sleep. Grades are going to suffer without sleep. So I like plugging for sleep. I really think it's great. Please do it. Office hours because your professors are lonely. All right, so that little subtitle there, I often ask my students for feedback on a class, but in the form of advice they would give students in the same class later in the next semester, say. And there was a class I had been teaching for a while. I'd been doing this for a while, getting this kind of feedback, but I asked one time, and one of the things I got from a student for other students in the future in that class was, go to office hours because Mark is lonely. That semester, I might have oversold the office hours and maybe done a little too much begging, I'm not sure. But it's not exactly the case that we're lonely, but it is the case that you should go to office hours, whoever you are, whatever you are. Students often think, I can just do it on my own. I should do it on my own. Like, it's bad if I have to see the professor to do this work. There's lots of pressure to not seek help. And I think that's all dangerous. That's all just sort of bad for you. Yes, you probably can do it on your own, but you can do it better with additional sort of one-on-one help. So it's absolutely not the case, and it's not our expectation that only bad students, only struggling students are going to come to office hours. Ideally, we want everybody there. Ideally, we want anybody to come to office hours because everybody can get some benefit from that. Everybody can benefit from one-on-one teaching. If you think about a normal class session, the teacher is having to teach every student there. And so they can't focus on the needs of any one individual student. In office hours, if it's you one-on-one with a professor, that professor can figure out exactly what you do understand, what you don't understand, what you need, and what might work best for you individually to get that, right? Like what type of explanation, what type of sort of working through some problem might help you individually based on the feedback you're giving them along the way. So that one-on-one help is far more valuable and effective than the class time itself. The class time is good. One-on-one, far better. And so on top of that, on top of the fact that literally anybody can go to get help and support in office hours, is this idea that you don't even need to be going for help on something. And this is something that not a lot of students recognize. You can go to office hours just to talk to your professor. You can talk about something you found interesting in class or related to the course topic. You can talk about the professor's research. We love to talk about our own thing. Why not? You can talk about the field in general. You can really just go and just talk. Now, I wouldn't go every single day, but there's actually a lot of benefit in just making more of that connection with your professor in a couple different ways. Building that relationship over time can pay off a lot later when you need things like recommendation letters, when you're applying for jobs or graduate school. Having that connection can help a lot. Building a sort of mentoring relationship can help a lot. And even just within the context of one class, the more a student knows you, the more a professor knows you, the more they can help you out and support you in that class. Whether it's just sort of like connecting with you when they see that something on a particular assignment didn't go right, they can help you with that if they have a better connection with you. Or just sort of pointing things out to you or finding resources that would make sense for you based on what they know about you along the way. So really, I want to encourage that. Just come talk to us. Faculty, we love it. We love having people come in our office hours and just talk, whether it's for help on some sort of assignment, for studying or anything, or just to talk. I also know a lot of students often feel that they don't know what to ask. They don't have a question, and so how can they go ask questions, right? This is really common to just think, well, I don't have a specific question, and so I can't get help. So I want to point out that it's not expected that you have super specific questions with super specific answers. If you do, great, we can work with that, of course. But it's totally fine to come say, I am stuck, or I just don't know, please help. You can be pretty vague, and we can work with that, right? As a faculty member, I can then ask some questions, figure out, okay, well, what do you understand and what don't you understand, right? What is it that I can help with best? Where are you and where do you need to be? I can work with the most vague, just sort of simple one-word help. Like I can work with that. And if you can, when you go, if you can sort of think through in advance and say, okay, here's what I've done so far, present that shortly, here's where I am, and here's what I might need, if you know. And sometimes you won't know, that's fine, but if you have some sense of what you might need, put that in there. And if you can kind of frame the session that way, that can help out, but it's really not needed, right? You can really just show up and say, please help, I don't know what to do. And that works fine. In addition to the office hours, there are other resources as well. Librarians, staff in various offices, tutors. And so you might think, well, is that a thing? Yeah, there are many other resources available, and we kind of expect and hope that you're going to ask about these, and please do. Just ask around about what additional resources are available for your particular course. There are many out there. And the thing to recognize is that these are all people who are experienced and trained in helping with whatever it is for your class. So there's the Writing Center for any writing in any class anywhere. There's the Math Resource Center for any mathematics. There's the Language Resource Center. There are a variety of tutors and TAs for a variety of classes that hold review sessions, hold their own office hours in addition to the professors. All of these resources are available. And they're all the sorts of things that using them will help you both do your work better and do your work faster. And I think this is a really important point. If you have work that's taking you a long time, very often you can get it done a lot faster by getting that sort of support from a tutor, from a resource center, from the professor in office hours, getting your work done faster, saving you that time on top of doing it better. It's kind of a win-win overall. So we really do expect you to be using these resources. They're there for you. And honestly, I think they're underutilized a lot. Like I think a lot of students don't really use them when they could and should be getting that benefit from them. And the thing to avoid is to, and this happens, right, is to ignore those resources until you're really in a dark spot, when you're like really in trouble. It's much better to use them as soon as anything's like a little difficult. As soon as anything is, I could use a little bit of help with this. This is taking me a little longer than I want, or I'm just not sure about this thing. Start using it then, get that benefit then, and avoid getting in that hole later. Because yes, you can get help when you're in the hole and we can help you out, but it's a lot better just to not end up in the hole in the first place. And super bonus points, tell your friends, right? Spread the word. Like a lot of you are going to be learning about these from your friends, but if you find out about a good resource that works well for you, brag about it. Be like, oh, hey, I got all this help on this thing. Tell people about it, spread the word, help other people recognize that these things are there and useful for them. All right, and then I think at the end of our little story a while back, Lee sent an email to the professor. And Lee sent an email like I've received many emails in the past. Very short, kind of super brief. And I know students have a different relationship with email than us older folk do. And I've heard students say like email, it's like for long, serious things. It's kind of like this whole thing, right? Like how do I just send a quick email, ask a quick question? I've had students surprised that I send really short one-line emails to my friends and like we kind of like do back and forth over email. Like I realized, okay, texting does that, Snapchat does that, other communication channels work just as well. But for people my age, people in my position, email is the main thing we use. But when we're using it, especially with a student, we're really going to expect that emails follow some basic professional communication standards. So you don't want to use an email like a text, right? So to make that concrete, please don't email like this. Email from a student to a professor, subject line just blank. Like I've gotten emails with just no subject line before. Okay. Email is literally, hey, what is my grade on that assignment? Hopefully we see a couple things wrong with this, but right, here's the better version. Have a subject that actually says what the email's about, helps us as we're scanning through our inbox. Open it with some sort of brief greeting. Now you might feel like, why? Well, it's just kind of like a polite standard that if it isn't there, it feels kind of rude, turns out. Now, what is that greeting? There's lots of ways you can do it. The safest way in almost any situation is just to say professor, last name, comma, all set. You can go by first name if the professor's fine with that. I'm fine with my students using my first name if they're comfortable with that. So if you open an email to me, Mark, that's fine. But professor, last name is always safe. So stick with that unless you know how that professor prefers to be addressed some other way. And then in the body, use complete sentences, punctuation, capitalization, and just, say something more than just like a bare request for the thing you want. You don't have to get overwrought with it. Don't go crazy with like hours of flowery prose. But you can see the difference between these two emails here in this example. And finally, have some sort of closing, some sort of sign off. Again, it's just sort of like this standard communication for professional communication. It helps us as faculty feel like you are sort of respecting us and our time. And maybe that doesn't make sense to you, but I promise it matters to us. And it is a standard just in the professional world, and it's something to start practicing and getting used to, because emails in college are going to look a lot like emails in whatever job you have, and just getting in that habit basically of writing emails in this more standard way is going to be a good idea. Okay, and so finally, I want to talk about just whatever other expectations there are out there, because I've covered some of the big ones throughout this. But there are certainly going to be more, and every professor has their own expectations, and maybe they're a little different from class to class. So how do we approach that? How do we handle that? I can't tell you about all of them right now, so how do you find out about them? And it's important to recognize that professors aren't always going to tell you everything you need to know. I mean, ideally we will, and we aim to do that, but it's not always going to happen. There are always going to be some things that are maybe unspoken or maybe just unclear along the way. So what do you do? Well, the expectation is this. If you are ever in doubt about an expectation, ask the professor. Hopefully that's simple enough. But I want to point out we are very happy to clarify. We are very happy to make sure everybody has the right information, everybody is on the same page. And as a super bonus points kind of a thing, if you can ask in a way that other students will benefit, that other students will get the response to, that's huge, because you are not the only student with that question. You are not the only student who's uncertain about that. I promise you this, like if you're not sure about something, half the class is in the same boat at least. And so if you are able to ask in class, or ask on a class forum, or on Piazza if your class is using that, where you can usually post anonymously, or on Discord, or whatever public channel you have, I realize there's some pressure against that. It might feel uncomfortable. But if you're able to do that, then the professor's answer is going to go to the whole class. And the other students in that class, they will silently be thanking you because, again, they had the exact same question. You were not alone. And so you've just helped out everybody else as well by getting that clarification from the professor. So I think this is the biggest point I want to make in all of this, is ask along the way. Even if you're just pretty sure but not quite, just ask, just verify, just double check. So asking questions, talking to your professors, and getting that information from them is going to be one of the biggest things you can do to be successful in this system you're in, where not everything is super clear up front. And that's it. Thank you.